Blaming on the wind. How we doing?
Good. How are you? Good. Well, Kevin, the trade that you just made about an hour ago, is that just the type of trade where there was just too much value to pass up?
Yeah, I think that's. Well, I look at this year's draft. We feel pretty strongly that after 6 or 7, it's really a wide range of where the names are going to go. We felt it's a real good value for us to make that deal. We really like the group of players we see ourselves potentially targeting at 14. We pick up an extra asset, which is good value, at pick 42, and then that's certainly something that we'll talk about. We're actively, shopping around to look and see if there's a deal to make to help our roster better with pick 43. So this just gives us a little bit more ammunition.
Does it hurt you from a trade standpoint, like you had talked about, you're willing to trade number 11 if the value is there for it? I guess my question is, was there really, as you went through trades, and they're really not the value you wanted, which made this more attractive, or can you still do something like that with the 14th?
Well, I guess the way I would say it is there was not a trade, and we went through every possible scenario with every team you could possibly go through that we felt comfortable made sense for pick 11. And there's also any trade that we've potentially looked at or talked about. It wasn't. There could still be the same trade there at 14. Okay. So that's part of the thought process as well. But I said we're doesn't mean we're done here. We're going to actively look. This pick's available. If it makes sense for us, we have assets to move back up. We could move down again. We just felt this one made sense for us based on what I said earlier.
I heard your comment on Sabres Live, and you were asked about Jeff. I know nothing's happened, obviously, but in terms of what you may do, would you maybe adding a top 6 forward? Is that something that you would be trying to do to, that could set the table for making a move like that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think, like I said maybe a week ago, I think everything's on the table. We're going to look at every possible scenario, whether that's trade opportunities to make our team better, who's out there in free agency, and those are things we're looking at and juggling. No final decision's been made on Jeff yet. We're not in a situation where we have to. We're not at that point. We can still continue to really see how this all shakes out. Obviously, with Jeff's situation in particular, and any trade scenario you may have a conversation about, he has a full no-move clause. So there's constant communication back to Jeff's camp there in Newport. But those are just things that we've worked on, and we're still working on.
Could a buyout of Jeff be predicated based on another trade?
Yeah, I think that's something that. Yeah, it's a fair way to say it. Basically, as we look at this, we're weighing everything. What are potential trades that we think help our team get better? If we made a move, where does Jeff slot in, our lineup? He's been an elite scorer in this league for a long time. But if not playing a top line, minute type role, where do you slot a player like that? So those are all the things you're kind of weighing. But like I said, we're heavily in those conversations internally and externally, and we still have time to make our final decision.
In terms of the no-move clause, obviously it'll depend on the team, but have you sensed an openness from him to that dialogue at least?
No. There's been honest communication, but no indication that that's something that they're willing to look at. But, all you can do is just have honest conversations and explain certain situations that could be out there. And we've done that. But, yeah, I wouldn't say there's been any sort of traction or movement.
Did you ask them, or they just simply say they weren't interested?
Well, I think part of my job is to make sure I'm communicating. When you have situations like this and there's a no move, that means no move. So there's, you have to – out of respect for the player, too. And this isn't – yeah, exactly. And this isn't just Jeff. This isn't any situation like this. If you have a player that has a no-move clause, and even if there was a situation that arose that you're interested in, the spirit of no moves, the player's not moving, and so you have to just start with transparency of information to the agent, which we've done now, back and forth to say, hey, here's some of the things we're thinking about internally. Here's things. And I said this last week. I have a lot of respect for Newport Sports, and these guys they're pros. They've been in this a long time. They know the business. They know the market. They do a good job with their players. So we just had honest dialogue, and they know everything we're thinking and talking about, and we know where they're at.
What happened to Jeff the second half of last year? Because he had 2 really good years, and he evolved into a different type of player, and he had a pretty decent first half. But something happened in the second half. Can you, I guess, put your finger on it? Do you know?
Hey, I think, look, in Jeff in particular, Jeff, like I said, he's an extremely talented hockey player. He's played over 1,000 games in this league and scored a lot of goals. He's clearly an elite offensive player. And I'm not sure, Bill, exactly. What I could say is it wasn't, anything with negative in terms of his personal gain. I think we all, as a team, we didn't perform well enough. And then, how does that affect individuals? I just go back to this. Like, we underperformed last year as a group. You have to make hard decisions, up and down your lineup. We have to figure out ways to get better, and that's every decision we make this offseason was with that in mind. And that'll be, part of this process we go through with Jeff.
How do you and the pro scouting staff feel about the market in terms of center for what you're looking at, the role that you want, whether it be free agency or trade?
Yeah, I mean, it's a position that's in demand. And we fully, it's a great question to ask, because as you build out your team, I mean, you're talking about this in amateur scouting meetings. If you have 2 players next to each other and one's a winger, one's a center, you're gonna lean towards the center. They're just harder to acquire, more valuable. Centers can usually flip to wing, so you take all those things into consideration. It's harder for wings to flip to center. It's an area that is not easy to acquire, and we talked a lot about that before we made the Casey Middlestat trade. To be honest with you, we felt that if we trade Casey Middlestat, we're going to be in a position where, okay, where are we up the middle? I do get excited about Peyton Krebs' game, where we believe he can get to. We have prospects in our system, but we also want to figure out how we're a better team now. So we're kind of balancing that, and but it's a good question because there's not a lot of centers out there.
Is there somebody that you won't give a qualifying offer to, and I'll include Stillman and Clegg in that also? The rest of them are your guys, but that they were the 2 Rochester guys.
Yeah, I don't want to get into specifics on, I want to make sure I have some conversations, with players specifically, but I don't think anyone would be surprised kind of, where we're at or what we're going to do there.
How much does the player having a clause affect how you're able to handle business? And, if that's a player you're looking to trade or move in some way, how much does that change how you approach things?
Changes everything. I mean, it's no move is of something that there's not that many players have in this league, and they've earned it, or they wouldn't get to that spot. So it changes everything, because it doesn't matter how many conversations I could potentially be having with another team, and a trade that I could potentially be excited about, the other team could be excited about. If the player with a no move isn't excited, it's not happening. So it's a completely different scenario than any other type of situation. Even if you had a player with limited, and no trade protection, you still may have conversations. You're just focusing on certain teams.
Kevin, what does it mean for you in the last month or two? You've been aggressive in the past, but you haven't maybe been aggressive building the team, I guess, maybe this way, so this is different for you. Just what's it been like for you and your staff to kind of tackle something a little different?
Yeah, it's a great question. It feels very different this year in terms of how we're looking at the phase we're in, I guess is the best way to say it. I feel that the last 3 years at the draft was so much about making sure that we were building our pipeline up and our prospect pool and putting ourselves in a position to have assets in our organization. Meanwhile, trying to do your best to look for trades and what options are out there to help your team. And we're always going to do that. You always have to have prospects and a funnel of players in your system. But it has flipped in the sense that we need to take a step. We need to be a team that's competitive, getting in the playoffs and fighting for those opportunities to do what we all want to do here, which is win a Stanley Cup. So we're willing to look at everything and anything that we feel makes us better. And I think you always in this job are going to do that, but just with now that we've built up the assets and the opportunities, we're actively trying. And in saying that, you have to be disciplined and smart. You're not just going to move assets to move them. It has to make sense for you.
Are there any of those prospects that you've told teams aren't available?
I don't typically just take things off the table. I'd rather have conversations, and you can always say no. Are there internally certain players that we'd be very unlikely to move? Of course, especially when you're talking about prospects in particular. One thing that probably doesn't get talked enough about is when you become a team that's getting right up to the cap. The players on entry-level contracts that can help you really become valuable. I mean, just look at Florida with a guy like Lundell plays a big role, and so that really matters. We're not there yet. We need to get better. But I see where our roster is going and the salaries and some of the extensions kicking in, we're inching there. So we just have to be mindful of that.
There's a lot of chatter about Carolina, not just with you guys, with a lot of teams. What's it like when you're in this situation dealing with a new GM?
Well, I'd prefer it not to be all over the media. Start with that. What was the question? Yeah, you know what? You have conversations, and you would prefer that they stayed between two teams if you're talking. But you can't control that. It doesn't change how you do things. And look, it's no secret. We're trying to do every possible thing we can to improve our team. And I guess the good news is, if we're rumored in a few things, there's a ton more that we're not in, being rumored in, but that we're in. We're trying to make sure that we're in every possible conversation out there, which is why this phone is ringing a lot this time of year. So I think it's a good thing. But yeah, it's not my preference to have it known to the world.
When that happens, do you immediately say, like, all right, definitely, we're good?
Well, I dealt with this a lot with the Jack Eichel situation, and because it was so much sensitive information, and so it's something that you kind of monitor. But no, you can't let stuff that's going on or noise distract you from what you're trying to do. But there's certainly some phone calls after that you have.
If you are going to trade significant future assets, whether it be prospects or picks, would you prefer it be a player who's inching toward their prime, that you would have the ability to have years of control, whether it be somebody who's an RFA or...
Yeah, I mean, in a vacuum, yes. Like in a perfect world, you're looking for that type of asset that can grow with your team. That's why going back to Bo Byram is such a tough trade, but a critical trade, because you feel like you're acquiring a player in their prime that can grow with you. Now, in saying that, even with the assets we have and the deep prospect pool we have, those players generally aren't available, even if you're willing to overpay. But you're still having those conversations and making sure. Yeah, so like for me, I'd rather, if we're going to move big assets, you'd certainly rather do it with a player that you feel is going to be with you for more than just a short time. But, you kind of balance everything. And like I've said to you guys before, then you really look at cost acquisition in terms of what they're doing in your lineup, where you're projecting, where Lindy sees that he might use them, and then you kind of make that decision.
Talking about all the conversations and phone calls that you've been in, the deal today, how long was that in the works?
Yeah, I don't remember when the lottery was. Probably a couple months ago now. I don't know, May maybe. But quickly after that, just making sure we're doing our homework. You're talking to every team around you. We've talked to every team in front of us, behind us, just to lay the framework of what a deal could look like if you're going to get there. So quite a while, and then it's when you get to the point of where it makes sense for both teams, then it's when do you do it? And today was the day.
On a personal level, when you get another pick, what did it mean to you to see Kyle raise that cup the other night?
Yeah, I mean, I was really happy for Kyle at Poso, in two ways. On a personal level, I believe he gave a lot to the Buffalo Sabres organization that will benefit our guys for years to come. And what I mean by that is, I remember when Ron Francis sat on one side, you had Eric Stahl, and then you had Rod Brind'Amour. And I remember thinking about, what Eric Stahl was learning at 18 years old from Ron Francis and Rod Brind'Amour. And Eric Stahl went on to play 20 years or close to 20 years in the NHL, and what Kyle Ekposo was able to do in his time in our organization, I mean, I can give you 10 to 15 names, but you know them already. But all those young guys in our lineup the last 2-3 years, he made an impact on. So that's a big deal. And then from just personal with him, just seeing him be able to raise the cup and have that opportunity, I'm fortunate enough to know how special a feeling that is. And I was happy for him, and I was also happy that we got a little better pick out of it.
Hey, when you look at the uncertainty in the draft, and I'm sure every team's draft boards might be wildly different from one team to another, how would you assess the depth, maybe, 12, 13, going through the end of the draft? And do you suspect there are going to be some, names dropping through the draft that in another year you wouldn't have expected to see?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if I'd say it that way. I think just the history of the draft is there's always risers and fallers, guys that fall. I don't know if faller's a word. But there's just always, there always is. And that's why I think I started by saying this draft in particular feels like after 6 or 7, you get to a really wide range, and that's going to be team preference. Could be a million different things of what the order goes for, why different teams have it the way. But that also really gets into that second round. You get into the top 45, and we really like the players that are there. So that was part of our process. But yeah, it's hard. You can go back and review drafts in a while and have a better answer to that. But I just think it's the nature of this draft and why the amateur scouts have challenging jobs. It's not easy.
What did last summer and last season teach you about what it's going to take to get yourself, over the edge this summer and into next season?
Well, I think you have to start with a core. And if you don't know what you're trying to build and why you're trying to build it, and then you're just going to make moves to make moves. So last summer, we had a group of players that we started to feel really good about as our core, and trying to, say, okay, even from the goaltending though, where are we? We believe in these young guys. Let's keep pushing them. Can they take steps? And then you look at the D core and you say, okay, I really like the pieces that we have, but could we add another top 4 to this group? That was a box we wanted to check, which fortunately we were able to do. Up front, I like the fact that you have Thompson and Tuck up the middle. That gives you a true, Thompson and Cuzzy up the middle. It gives you a true 1-2 punch. You know what I mean? So, as you look at that, then you say, how do we make sure from a depth perspective that we're making sure we're balanced? Some of that comes from Rochester. Some of that comes from whether it's trades, free agents, or other things that you're adding to your roster. I'd like to see us get a little bit, harder to play against. I'd like to see us have a little more physicality, especially lower down in our, either lower on our depth chart on D or, in that bottom 3-4 group in our forward lines. And then lastly, I think you just want to see guys that maybe have some versatility that can bump up your lineup if you have injuries, even if it's for a short time, have versatility that they could kill penalties or be powerful. You know what I mean? You're just having that balance. So it's a long way of saying, I don't know if I learned that last summer. You kind of just know in this league that you have to have a lot of depth. You have to have people buying into their roles. And then you have to make sure that in saying all of that, that your players are completely aligned with the coach in the way that you're expecting to be playing every night. And I personally use the words like non-negotiables. There has to be non-negotiables between the coaching staff and the players that everybody's buying into. And I think that's one of the things I'm most excited, where Lindy will have that clarity for our guys, and we'll attack camp. So it's an exciting time. This is an important week right now for our organization, and and then it'll be nice to kind of say, man, let's get training camp going and play some hockey, and it'll be here quick.